I remember the very first time I ever saw Adult Swim. It was Christmas 2002, and I was staying with my family in Arizona. I was up late one Saturday night and I was flipping through channels and I came across Cartoon Network, which I didn't have at the time. And what I saw that night practically changed me forever. Never before had I seen anime that was any more mature than an episode of Pokemon. Hell, I didn't even know they made cartoons for adults back then. To say that this was an utter shock to me would be an understatement, and I was hooked ever since. It was this anime block that made me into the man I am today. Suck my dick until you are less man and more cockwarmer! Nope. Sanity's still slipping safely away. A twisted, misshapen man, but a man nonetheless. So, as you can tell, I am psyched for this month. For 3 weeks, I get to stroll down memory lane with all of you guys, and curate anime I haven't seen since my voice was making me sound like Jeremy Friedman. Unfortunately, it will not be a complete trip. Sadly, I'm going to have to leave out Gundam 0083. My reason being that, if I did talk about 0083, I would have to talk at length about Gundam, and completely derail the entire Adult Swim motif. Trust me, Gundam 0083 will find its way onto the show, but to try and force it here when there's so much else to talk about would be unwise. With that said, let's get this party started and kick it into high gear. Roll the music!
Internet strongly cautioned. The following review is intended for mature audiences that can take a joke. This review may contain some material that is not suitable for children, bronies, or Tumblr users, and may contain intense violence, sexual situations, coarse language and Nazi jokes.
Now, as much as I look back on my Adult Swim days with rose-tinted glasses, I am well aware that not every show they had was the best. Or all that great. Or all that good. Or all that watchable. You know what? Actually, some shows were complete shit. It's rare that you find consensus within the anime community, but when it comes to the bad shows that Adult Swim aired, you're pretty much going to find everyone in agreement. We're going to be looking at 2 such examples today. Blue Gender and Pilot Candidate. Well, you all remember grade school. First the worst.
Awesome! It's awesome! Awesome! So this is Zion? It's a star! A star!
I have something of a confession to make. When I first saw Pilot Candidate, I convinced myself I liked it. I don't know why for sure, but I think it's because I was so enamored by the concept of late-night anime that I thought all of it had to be good. So consider this segment something of an exorcism for me. Pilot Candidate sucks the shit out of a septic tank! It's an incomplete, formulaic, confusing, nonsensical punch to the throat of an anime. Pilot Candidate is to anime what Taco Bell is to Mexican food. Pilot Candidate is so evil, it would kill every rich kid's parents just so it can make a real-life Batman. If I was trapped in a room with Pilot Candidate and Hitler, and I had a gun with 1 bullet in it, I would give it to Hitler so he can have the honor. I don't like this show very much. The fact that it was broadcast on American television astounds me. Hell, the fact that this was localized in the first place astounds me. Why in the world would a company buy the rights and go through the trouble of translating, dubbing, encoding, and marketing a show that was never even finished? Pilot Candidate never completed its run in Japan. It got 12 episodes in and then bam, cancelled. It got one 30-minute OVA afterward, but it was never brought over to the States. And according to my research, it didn't help anything. It doesn't take you long to figure out why this show was cancelled.
Woman!
Woman?
We are that.
Woman. They're not.
Honestly, I'm surprised this lasted 12 episodes. So, what is Pilot Candidate about? Well, it's about a hyperactive idiot voiced by Ty from Digimon, who might as well be Ty from Digimon if he spent his youth huffing paint. It's the future, and the last bastion of humanity in the galaxy is threatened constantly by a marauding alien force called Victim. Guess what, Tumblr? Here, you can blame the victim. The only thing stopping Victim is a quintet of robot pilots that, if they sacked up and formed Voltron, I'd actually give a shit, who are led by a woman who is important for some reason. The hyperactive idiot wants to become a pilot, but before that, he must go through a candidacy process. A pilot candidate, if you will. And honestly, that's about it. From that little description, you could probably fill in the blanks yourself if you know thing one about the giant robot genre. The idiot is some kind of piloting savant, there's a brooding emo kid who's his rival, there's a nebbish dweeb who for some reason can't stop flipping me off, a grizzled instructor who I swear to God looks like Aaron, and there's the rest of the crew that won't matter in the slightest. It's as basic and formulaic as you can get. Oh, sure, there's a ton of plot threads and such that try to add some much-needed identity to the series, but because it ends at 12 episodes, all of them just dangle in the noonday sun like Harmonica's brother. There are so many unresolved plot threads that surely no one can recite them all in a comedically fast-paced manner. And surely not set to appropriately fast-paced music. If it is fundamentally impossible for a woman to pilot these robots, why is the best pilot a woman? What is the relationship between this woman pilot and the Keola Rens type character of the show? What is EX and why is it necessary to pilot the robots? What is the connection between the idiot and the spirit or whatever it is inside the robot Ingrid? If over the course of their training each candidate loses memories of their past, why does it seem to affect only the idiot? Why does the idiot have no bodily imperfections when it's established that everyone does? Who are victim? No, seriously, they never go into detail about the monsters they're attacking. They're the antagonistic force of the story, and we don't know thing one about them. Is the rival kid evil? We see flashbacks of him looming over the corpses of what we can assume are his parents, but he just winds up taking money from their wallets and runs away like a bitch. Why the fuck is there a cat girl here? That last question really drives home how broken Pilot Candidate is. She's the idiot's partner and mechanic, and for some reason, she's a cat girl. And she's the only one. Everyone just sort of accepts the fact that she has cat ears over the course of the show, which is made even weirder because she's self-conscious about it to the point of hiding them under her hat, at least at first. But then the character trait just sort of falls by the wayside and never brought up again. Is she an alien? A mutant? Why does nobody ask about it?
What's up with your cat ears?
I don't want to talk about it.
Okay.
See? 2 seconds, and I've already solved the issue without ever having to add any character traits that were just going to be ignored by the end anyway. Was that so hard? I have a feeling that Bandai knew exactly what they were dealing with here, considering how lazy and rushed the dub was. The acting isn't terrible per se, but half the time the voices didn't match the lip flaps, and the script is just god-awful, especially when it comes to the idiot.
It's awesome, awesome, awesome!
Don't you have any other words in your vocabulary?
It's awesome because it's really awesome!
Even if the show was able to have a nice, neat little narrative and was able to tie up all these loose plot threads, it still wouldn't be able to fix the god-awful dub. It checks nearly every box for awful dubbing. Awkward dialogue, painfully transparent exposition, dialogue that doesn't even follow conversation.
Who was it? And what happened here?
In the cockpit of Eve Arena.
That answers his question, how? However, I will say that Pilot Candidate is not without merit. It does feature a rather surprising and awesome score. Remember when anime scores used to be orchestral and optimistic? Yeah, I kind of miss that. Listen to this. It sounds like John Williams and Alan Silvestri made sweet love to each other, and this was the musical butt baby they made. Even when the action on screen doesn't match the tone of the score, it still resonates with me. Wow, look at those robots! Just standing there. I haven't been this excited since I made my morning coffee! It's a shame that the show itself couldn't live up to its own sweeping music. I mean, here I am, listening to this, imagining an anime to go along with it, and I get this?
Ah! Getting in fistfights is your prerogative! Don't involve me anymore!
Well, now we know why Bandai left the game. Good riddance.
I ain't backing down!
They all go through this.
Something strange, very strange is happening!
Anime Abandon will return in a moment.
You will follow my orders exactly.
I got something for you! Make it stop!
Anime Abandon now continues.
Our next series may seem like it has nothing to do with Pilot Candidate, but there are some similarities that you may not give it credit for. For one, it's about a boy piloting a mech against monsters bent on destroying humanity. And two, it also blows chunks. Alright, I'm fibbing a little. Blue Gender isn't nearly as bad as Pilot Candidate, not by a long shot. It's got a complete story, kind of, and there's an actual focus on the main character, so we learn about him. Unlike Candidate, where the story had the attention of... Damn it! I'm sorry. I know we're supposed to be talking about Blue Gender, not about Pilot Candidate. We already beat that horse to death and buried it. Let's not dig it up again. Blue Gender is definitely more frustrating than Pilot Candidate, if there is a direct comparison to be made. While I don't think Candidate had a chance to be good from the get-go, Blue Gender had an interesting premise and setup, but wound up failing to deliver. It follows the story of Yuji, a teenager who was cryogenically frozen because of a disease that never seems to affect him. He wakes up decades later to find out that giant bugs, dubbed Blue because fuck you, have laid waste the kingdoms of man. Having been woken from his sleep, he is led to the last refuge humanity has left in outer space by Marlene, a cold soldier who only cares about completing her mission. By the skin of their teeth, the two make their way to Second Earth, where they find out why exactly Yuji is so valuable and what his sickness means for humanity's future. Here's a spoiler.
It's really stupid.
Alright, the setup isn't the most original in the world, but there is possibility, and to the anime's credit, it does make you want to learn more about what the Blue are and how Yuji figures into all of this. It's good that the series has this, because the mystery is the only thing that's keeping the audience's attention. Otherwise, the beginning is a complete dud. Though Yuji goes through a nice character arc over the series, at the beginning he's an obnoxious whiny brat.
This isn't real. This can't be happening. Oh, please. Make it stop. Make it stop. I've had enough of being alone in this freaking place. You understand?
Yeah, sure, his disposition is understandable and perhaps relatable, but this kind of trait isn't exactly likable in a main character. You want to be able to root for the hero of the story, not be annoyed to death when he opens his face hole. If you want to have your protagonist be a fish out of water, you have to be able to rein it in and not let it be his only defining characteristic through most of the story. In other words, it's not that he bemoans his fate and bitches about how Marlene doesn't care about anyone left on Earth. It's just that it seems like that's all he does.
I get it. As long as I'm alive, you're happy because you still got your precious sample. And this is just a mission, isn't it? Well, what about Joey and Robert? You saw your own people die right in front of you. How can you think nothing of it? Huh?
It gets to the point where you find yourself on the side of Marlene, and even the story seems to frame her cold reasoning in the right, which makes it all the more confusing when she has a heel turn towards the later half of the story and finds herself going against her superiors on Second Earth. And that's endemic of Blue Gender. Our main characters go through a sort of character arc, but it's not gradual or seamless. It's actually quite jarring. Marlene's eventual softening and more caring nature comes through by the end of the first act, which is to be expected, but Yuji's arc of being caring but confused to bloody psychopath back to being caring again comes out of nowhere. Oh yeah, it's revealed that Yuji's sickness is the source of what the show calls B-cells, and the leaders of Second Earth figured that they could harness the power of these B-cells to make more powerful mechs to fight the Blue.
The B-cells could be best described as an overly powerful antibody. Their instinct is to aggressively kill off whatever germs might invade the body, and if left alone, they could be harmful to the body itself. But imagine what might happen if the combative instincts of the B-cells could be linked directly to the central nervous system of a machine. By combining a sleeper with a specially designed armor strike, we've created a weapon that harnesses the very nature of the B-cells to rid the Earth of the germ infestation known as the Blue.
Not that his disease is the source of an infection that could be used against the Blue to wipe them out, but that his disease can somehow make him a better mech pilot. What is it with anime and making their heroes genetically predisposed to being mech pilots? To me, this plot point seems like it was written on the fly, like there was no plan for an endgame at the beginning of the show, and my theory proves more and more viable by the end, but we'll get to that. All they had was that Yuji was valuable because of his disease, but no one quite figured out how that would be used in the story at large. So they just whipped up this cockamamie theory that mechs could be built around these bullshit B-cells. Oh, and speaking of bullshit, the Blue are about the biggest pile of bullshit antagonists I've ever seen. Apparently, these bugs are super creatures, able to evolve faster than the humans can kill them. Seriously, these critters evolve faster than Pokemon. Their weak points are exposed earlier on, but then they start evolving armor to protect it. And it goes further than that. Somehow, the Blue have evolved several subspecies that are ultra-specialized, like being able to siphon power from electrical lines, and possess people. And yes, these species appear once each, and only once each. I don't think the Blue evolved to ward themselves against natural predators. I think they evolved so that the plot can pull bullshit turn after bullshit turn. You find yourself screaming at your TV as the show progresses, as the setups that Blue Gender so carefully build wind up being nothing more but bullshit payoff after bullshit payoff. You find out later that the sickness that Yuji and a few others have, what the show calls sleepers, were the source of the Blue, and that they are meant to be agents of destruction made by the Earth to try and rid itself of humanity. Yup, we're taking a fuck humanity turn.
The B-cells were born of the very Earth you've been so desperately trying to save.
They were what?
The Earth knew all along. In time, mankind would give birth to the Blue by its own hand, and then we would awaken. And when we did, we would sacrifice our egos, surrender our will, and we would discover the true purpose of the powers we've been given.
Towards the last act, when Yuji's B-cells are causing him to go insane and violent and one of the sleepers goes rogue and leads a bunch of Blue onto Second Earth, is when the story kind of sputters out. It all builds into a non-climax where Yuji, having been slapped back into sense by Marlene, confronts the sleeper and winds up just shooting him in the head before the rest of humanity's fleet blows up that part of the station. And yet, this is still not the end. No, the end comes when Yuji and Marlene find the mystical core of the Earth, and then Yuji merges with it to become a star baby or something. Okay, that's certainly an ending. By the time the show ends, there is such a disconnect between what began the show and how it ended that you have a hell of a time believing you were watching only one show. It's like the writers each had their own idea of how the show should be, and instead of compromising on one, they decided to Frankenstein them all into one gigantic mess of a plot. But the most frustrating thing about Blue Gender is that there are some good ideas here at play. They just never got a chance to explore them. During the first few stages of Marlene's and Yuji's relationship, there was an engaging back and forth between someone who grew up during the Blue Scourge and someone who didn't, between optimism and cold hard pessimism. Additionally, there are interesting elements about the society of Second Earth, namely that it's Bone City! Seriously, everyone in Blue Gender is hardcore fucking. There is so much casual sex going on here, I'm surprised their main export isn't syphilis. The station has co-ed locker rooms, yes, just like Starship Troopers, and even has its own area solely for the purpose of its citizens to bang. And the show is not subtle about this in the slightest.
Hey there. You like what you see?
Weren't those two supposed to be monitoring that control board? How does anyone get anything done here? Yes, I've tried turning on and off the router, but I still can't get any internet. Yes, I'll hold. Come on. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean you. Speaking of Starship Troopers, the bugs themselves are shamelessly vaginal in design. You don't need to be Freud to see the symbolism of Yuji's dream here.
Listen, I could be dead by tomorrow, or maybe seconds from now. There's just no way of knowing.
I'm not sure what the intent of having the blue look like vaginae are, but there sure is a lot of vaginal symbolism going on. Even the machine that the one insane sleeper uses to battle Yuji looks suspiciously like a uterus. Well, that might just be me. I tend to look too much into these sorts of things. Like here, for example. Totally a vagina. And that. And that. Holy hell, that's a sopping wet. Okay, wrapping it up. If I have to give Blue Gender one thing, it's that it fails only by the virtue of the fact that they tried to reach further than its grasp. The show feels like it has 10 different ideas fighting each other to try and get screen time, and instead of coalescing into a single story, they just rip the story at the seams. Still, a story with ideas is better than one without. So concludes part 1 of our look at Adult Swim. Tune in next week for part 2, where we'll look at some more, shall we say, beloved titles. Till next time.